Who are these characters in those early bands?
Well, they're not all specific people all the time, but they are, like I talked about, characters that you meet along the side of the road or in the streets. And my education, as you notice in these songs, I'm not writing about going to college. My education took place in the streets and on the road.
You did grow up in the road, touring constantly for a half-dozen years with Ronnie Hawkins as the Hawks and then with Bob Dylan. But the band were a very different story. Collectively, you played fewer shows than virtually any of your contemporaries, and in fact, you didn't even tour after the release of your debut LP, Music from Big Pink. Why the reluctance to gig?
It wasn't the usual. You know, you put out a record and then you go out there and you tour behind the record. That's automatically what you do. And I was kind of enjoying the idea of breaking the rules again. And you do this and then just don't show up. You just let this record just mingle out there in the world and do whatever it's going to do, just on its own merit. And not because we're out there plugging it, you know. I kind of enjoyed that at the same time. But what all this did was it led up to this kind of strange mystique.
Sure did.
For the band. And it wasn't necessarily that there was a strange mystique. It was just, you know, just incidents that kind of led to that. But when that did happen, I thought, well, that's okay too.
One of the things that intrigues me about the band was the way the vocals were arranged. You know, musicologists call it heterophony, but another way of putting it for lay people is simply together but untogether. People are singing the same lines, but some people are early, some people are a little late. There's this sort of gray area of intonation sometimes. How deliberate was that?
Well, I didn't like this singing that everybody like came in perfectly together. It reminded me of being in school. And you're singing a song and somebody would come in a little early or a little bit late. And I always thought it kind of stood out and it made something nice happen against the music, a little call and answer feeling almost. So I thought that was a bad rule. and people that would sing perfectly together, I don't know, it just didn't feel real to me. It wasn't like an orchestra playing together. These are human voices. And when they weave in and out of one another, that's when it was the most interesting to me. Always, over the years, the guys always said, I think you should sing this song. And it always felt to me like there'd be something very unbalanced about that. You know, so that's why I didn't do it very much in the band. And I thought that the guys were great singers, and it also gave me an opportunity to stand outside it a little bit and look at it properly. Look at the cast of characters like the director should be looking at this thing and really helping shape it. So it is telling the story, and it is getting across what I was trying to write about in the song. It was like, I'll know it when I hear it, or I'll recognize it when I see it.
The band quickly began to experience internal problems. In fact, between the release of Cahoots in the fall of 1971 and 1975's Northern Lights Southern Cross, you didn't release a single album of new original material. What was going on in this period?
It was hard for me to pull the whole thing together. And it was hard for me during Cahoots. And it started before that, even. But during Cahoots, it was just like, you know, everybody would, if everybody would show up, it was still not like everybody was there. And there was a whole feeling of pulling teeth. Everything was hard, and so, and it was painful trying to do things, and there'd be just no sense of it going anywhere. So it was hard for me to write under those circumstances. It was hard for us to get together and make music. Once again, you know, I'm thinking about, okay, what do you learn from this? I mean, outside of going there and picking up a paycheck, you know, outside of it being a business, where's the growth? And I was always like, I'm not into theater, I'm into movies. I don't want to do the same show on Broadway for a year, or 2 years, or 5 years. Yikes. You know, I want to do this thing and then live through that and go on to the next thing and live through that, and those challenges. Repeating something over and over again didn't seem that challenging to me. So after that certain period, I wasn't very drawn to it. And also, it was like, you know, I was explaining that things were becoming difficult to do with the band. It was like dragging this monster around the country. And when you're in a group, you're very affected by it, you know, and it's like, it's no different than a family. And if somebody in the family is ill, the whole family is affected by this. Or if somebody in a family is an alcoholic, the whole family is affected by this. It isn't just like, oh, this person and nobody else has to deal with this. Everybody has to deal with this. And it was a very, very difficult time, the guys in the band, and everybody became really quite separated at that time and discouraged.
On American Thanksgiving in November 1976, the band gave their final performance, appropriately entitled The Last Waltz.
Back with my wife in Tennessee.
This program has been brought to you in part by Inniskill and Ice Wines. Freeze the moment with Inniskill and Ice Wines.
The band in the 60s and 70s. Robbie Robertson's comeback is a bit of a mixed blessing.
I was always more interested in trying to get a timeless
screen, Martin Scorsese and music from
you almost have to stand back.
The band
to really
Tonight on the program, Robbie Robertson, a songwriter, a guitarist, and a musical visionary. He's played and worked with just about everybody.
It was the culmination of a musical career that started 20 years before. Born in Toronto, Mohawk descent, he had learned to play guitar and play blues, but began visiting the situation with his grandson.
Picture screen, Martin Scorsese, and from Canada's, I think you could say, the band, Robbie Robertson. Together now with...
As with everything they did, the band went out in style, with The Last Waltz being a 4-hour concert featuring some of the biggest names in rock and roll at the time, including Bob Dylan, Van Morrison, and Joni Mitchell. The complete event was filmed by Martin Scorsese, with whom Robbie formed a lifelong friendship. For someone who's made his reputation, you know, created some of the greatest songs that one can imagine in the post-war period, your reputation is as a songwriter primarily. There's been prolonged periods of virtually no songwriting activity, at least no songwriting activity that's reached the public. There have been points where you've lost complete confidence in your abilities?
I've lost interest at times, that the challenge just wasn't challenging me. And there was other challenges that at sometimes would take my attention. I got caught up in experimenting with music and film, and I was learning something from it, and it was something that I'd never really ever thought about. Wow, that's exactly what I want to do. But the merging of these two worlds was really natural for me, because I was always very strongly connected to film, and a lot of music that I wrote, people always referred to it as being very cinematic.
Absolutely.
So all of this stuff, it was kind of a natural lead-in.
You've done extensive work for film soundtracks in the past 20 years, and have developed a reputation as an expert in source music. The aesthetic you bring to the marriage of sound and image has led you to work with a host of acclaimed directors, including in recent times Oliver Stone and Michael Radford. How did you begin working in film?
Martin Scorsese asked me to help out in the music for Raging Bull. And that was really eye-opening, too. This was, once again, there was a little bit of a revolution going on. This music was different. It wasn't the same music like that people used in films. And I learned some things from it. That's the big thing for me, is the growth process. And I was thinking, I've been making records and doing tours and making records and writing songs and doing tours. And I just want off this train for a little while. I want to go to a little different destination for a bit. And I thought, and I don't feel a real need. I don't feel like I need to write songs all the time, that's all that I want to do. But I don't feel that way. So I tend to drift.
When you did decide it was time to make the album Robbie Robertson, did you approach it with a certain sense of trepidation? Was there any sense of, here I am out there by myself?